Hi, welcome to another podcast by the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. The Global Network was created in 1992 to prevent the arms race from moving into space. You can support the show by clicking on the like button and subscribing to our YouTube channel. That way you'll get announcements when we come out with a new video. And also check out our website at spaceforpeace.org. We want to thank Global Network board member Will Griffin for doing the tech work to make this show possible. And our guest this time is Lisa Savage, who is the Global Network's social media coordinator, and she lives in Solon, Maine. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. Why don't we start out by you taking a moment and briefly introducing yourself more?
Sure, thanks. I'm a retired teacher and an author and an organizer here in Maine. Bruce and I have been working together for many years, and I think you mentioned that I'm a board member also on the Global Network. So that is very interesting. Job. I also am a grandmother with 6 grandchildren, 4 of them right in the area. So that spend a lot of time doing that. And so thank you for having me on the show. It's good to talk about both Palestine and Ukraine at this point in history.
All right, well, let's get right into it. So why is this assault on Gaza not like others that have happened in the past in terms of public sentiment? And will this be a game changer as we see protests all over the world and mounting pressure on both Tel Aviv and Washington by people around the world and governments around the world?
I think there are a couple of reasons that are feeding into this seeming to be an unprecedented level of public support for the Palestinian liberation cause. One of those would just be generational. Our generation, the baby boomers, is not particularly pro-Palestine for the most part, and has for years been subjected to a lot of propaganda about why Zionists represent all Jews, which is a point of confusion for a lot of older people. And also, I think the younger people haven't been subjected to that much propaganda. Many of them studied the Holocaust and other genocides and ethnic cleansing campaigns in school. So they have testified recently that they are able to recognize ethnic cleansing or an attempted genocide when they see it, because they know the abstract principles that you'd be looking for aside from, which label is on which group. I think that the unprecedented level of violence, the aerial bombing of Gaza to the extent where the damage is being compared to like Hiroshima or Nagasaki, even though a nuclear bomb wasn't used, that has really shocked people and horrified people. And also the very high percentage of children that have died. The targeting of hospitals and United Nations schools has shocked the world. And the third factor, I would say, is probably social media. Now that everybody's got a cell phone and they've got the capability to record video and then upload it and share it with the world, we are getting the kind of reporting of wartime atrocities and suffering that was always filtered through the mainstream media, which basically does, works on the government's behalf. And that has been a game changer. So as far as what the effect will be of having these outpourings of hundreds of thousands of people marching in every major city around the globe for Gaza and for Palestine, I don't think Israel's going to win this one. I don't think the US and Israel together can possibly achieve the goal they've stated, which is to wipe out Hamas. You don't bomb a resistance movement and wipe it out. The more you bomb, the more resistance fighters are born. And so I think it's a dangerous time. Both Israel and the US have nuclear weapons, and they're kind of getting backed into a corner. Their backs are against the wall. I also think this is the first time in my lifetime that the general public has understood that the US and Israel may have different flags, they may have different, seated governments, but essentially our corporate overlords who make the decisions and the hired celebrities, the politicians who explain them to us, are essentially the same in terms of the U.S. and Israel. The decision makers are the same, and so a lot of people have not understood that in the past. Sometimes they say, "Oh, Israel controls the U.S. government," or the U.S. Sends too much money to Israel. Essentially, it's the same decision makers, and it's useful for them to have these nation states that they can kind of operate through almost like puppets, so that they can play the Holocaust card in the case of Israel and claim that the very real suffering of Jewish people in Europe during World War II and the run up to it justifies a genocide against Arabs in the indigenous Arab population of Palestine.
Actually, I noticed today that even the Pope apparently has, in the last few days, used the word genocide to describe what Israel is doing. And Israeli government officials were very upset about him sticking his neck into it. What right does he have to speak out like this? But anyway, that was an interesting development. Let's go on to the next question. What do you think the U.S. role has been in this war on the Palestinian people? Not just the people of Gaza, but the West Bank is being also brutalized almost on a daily basis. And so what is the U.S. role in all of this?
Well, the U.S. role is to supply them with weapons, with intelligence via satellites and communications. To the U.S. parks its warships in the Eastern Mediterranean and also the Red Sea to protect Israeli shipping. The U.S. runs interference in the media, in the corporate media, for Israel's decisions and violence. But it's a two-edged sword. The reputation of the U.S. internationally has plummeted during this last 5 weeks because of their clear and public support of genocide. Once you've seen pictures of decomposing premature babies that were removed from incubators because Israel took over the hospital and didn't take care of the premature babies that were in there, it's pretty hard to get over seeing something like that and then feel the same about the big power over here that was saying, don't touch Israel, that Israel can do no wrong. We have their back no matter what. I think we've reached the no matter what phase now.
So what do you think is going to happen next? Do you think, we're at these pregnant pauses now? They go for 2 days and then they stop, and then we're not sure if there's going to be another one. Israel is in no hurry to ever say, yeah, we'll keep trading people and releasing, prisoners and things like that. But Israel keeps threatening that they're going to go right back to it again. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think they will go right back to it again. They clearly think they can completely push Palestinians out of Gaza, either by bombing them or bulldozing them or both. They've got Egypt on the one border and Jordan on the other border saying, we're not letting you turn this population into refugees in our nation. We fell for that before, 40 years ago, 75 years ago, and we're not going to fall for it again. But, the violence in the West Bank hasn't stopped during this ceasefire. They're shooting and killing children, minors, who are celebrating because a family member or their neighbor was let out of prison in the prisoner hostage exchange. So they're now, the Israeli government is claiming like that the deal was there would be no celebrating. Well, that wasn't part of the deal that was agreed to, but an Israeli government official told the Palestinians that they could not celebrate the return of their loved ones. It's just, it goes beyond what any rational person would subscribe to or believe was possible. So I think that it seems that Israel and the U.S. are delusional, and it's hard to know what a delusional superpower with nuclear weapons will do if they feel that their survival is at stake. So I'm afraid we're going to probably see a lot more violence, because what we're not seeing at this point is the Saudis or Iran or, publicly Turkey probably is the one that the regional power that has said the most clearly to Israel, cut it out or you're going to be dealing with us soon. So far, the other neighbors haven't been willing to publicly rock the boat, but their populations, of course, put pressure on those governments saying, you're just going to stand by while this genocide happens. So that makes their government feel unstable and their domestic situation become more risky. And I think that's a factor.
I think you said you watched our new video that we released yesterday about how U.S. is using satellite technology to help Israel run its war on Gaza. It was done by our fellow board member, Will Griffin, who's helping us with this tech work on this show. Could you give a plug for that video and say a few things about it?
Yeah, it is a really good video and very current. It starts out by pointing out the role of the Pine Gap base in Australia, which is the surveillance base the US uses to intercept all digital communications in Asia, including West Asia. And that is, a big violation of Australian sovereignty, really, that the Australian people don't agree with. And I was very happy to see them blocking the road to Pine Gap, a group, with Free Gaza and Stop the Genocide signage. A very interesting part of that video, I knew more already about the technical aspects of how the U.S. lets Israel benefit from their surveillance technology that is, run from space. Those satellites are, part of our Space Force, and that's a U.S. project. But I found really interesting that Will decided to use a clip from Glenn Greenwald's System Update show, which was Joe Biden, our current president, in every decade, essentially saying Israel can do no wrong, essentially saying Israel and the U.S. are one and the same for the purposes of this discussion. And he has reiterated that less and less eloquently as he ages, but that was an interesting thing to include. And I liked how, Will put that in for the context of, really, did the U.S. just start helping Israel with this kind of stuff? No, they've been right there all along. Essentially, someone else called, it wasn't in the video, but someone else called Israel the U.S.'s unsinkable aircraft carrier, because since the end of World War II, when the state of Israel was created by Zionist violence, the Nakba, ejecting the indigenous people there, since that time, the U.S. has very much used Israel to project power all through the region where there are lots of oil and natural gas deposits. I don't think it's an unsinkable aircraft carrier anymore. And I think that no matter how much bluster we hear from the U.S. government or Israel's government, I think they know that. My guess is they started this assault on Gaza, this unprecedented level of trying to completely push, 1 million people out of the biggest concentration camp that's ever been built. I think it's because they realize we'll never be stronger than this. The U.S. and Israel will never be stronger militarily than they are right now today. So we better make our move now. That doesn't mean they'll prevail. I don't think they will.
That's a really good point. That both the U.S. and Israel are clearly collapsing on many levels, and they're at that inflection point. And I think you're right. They're realizing we got to go for the whole ball now, in spite of the fact that they're angering the entire planet, or most of it anyway, except for the West. Although there are a lot of Europeans in the streets in Germany and France, they've been told you can't protest, but they do anyway. But their governments are absolutely slavish, as ours is, toward Israel. Well, by the way, you can find that video uh, about the U.S. helping Israel on using U.S. space technology attack Gaza. You can find it at our website, spaceforpeace.org, and just go to the resources section. We have a place there full of videos, and it'll be in there. Also, you can find it on my blog, which is called Organizing Notes, Notes. Let's shift to Ukraine, the US's other favorite war. How do you see this collapsing war in Ukraine fitting into the bigger picture of the current era of US imperial decline that we were just referring to?
Well, it's been really interesting to me. I think that the narrative control around the proxy war on Russia using Ukraine as the cat's paw, the narrative control in the West was a rehearsal for narrative control for the war on Gaza. It feels very much to me at the time, those of us who've opposed all the wars, and I'm already against the next war, definitely experienced that Ukraine was a Democratic Party project, and Democrats pushed back on our right to even dissent. It wasn't that they said, you're wrong and I disagree with you. We constantly heard the message, you have no right to speak against this imperial project. Not that we accepted that, but it was kind of, different. It was a different argument. And a lot of people were silenced or fired or, in other ways, canceled, retaliated against for having a view that did not go along with the Democratic Party's line on, Ukraine being unprovoked. When you hear these phrases repeated over and over and over, like unprovoked, they said the same thing about the Hamas breaking through the Gaza, barriers, the fences and stuff on October 7th. They said it was unprovoked. Well, 75 years of settler colonial violence is a lot of provocation. But I felt like the game plan was similar. But that can't change facts on the ground. And the facts on the ground are, as many analysts said from the start, Ukraine can't beat Russia militarily. It isn't possible. No matter how much NATO throws in, no matter how much the US throws in, Ukraine is not capable of militarily defeating Russia, which has been invaded from the West many, many times in its history as a nation and is always prepared to defend itself. And, Russia, the Russian entry into Ukraine's civil war, the US caused Ukraine's civil war. And then after Ukraine had Nazified and killed so many Russian-speaking people and canceled them and, bombed them and so forth, Russia finally said, okay, we can't stand by and watch this anymore. We're going to go in and we're going to protect the Russian speakers that are in these regions. And that's what we're going to do. Of course, that was unprovoked. That was unprovoked. Everybody always wants to pretend like, that war started the day that Russia said, okay, we're doing the special military operation. It didn't. It started years and years and years before. But again, this is the narrative control. People in the US at least have very little sense of history. Things get memory hold almost instantly. We don't seem to learn from our past mistakes. One of the things, I didn't know very much about the Russian military or the Ukrainian military, but what I did know is the US and NATO haven't won a war in my lifetime. They didn't win in Korea. That's just a ceasefire that's never been, the Korean people have been asking look, can we finish this war, declare it over, and reunify already? No, that's still stuck in time since like 1950. We certainly did not win in Vietnam. We certainly did not win in Afghanistan. We certainly did not win in Iraq, et cetera, and so on. Why would they think that they could beat Russia on the battlefield? At this point, the Chinese and Russians have weapons that we don't even have. They have hypersonic weapons. I think North Korea has hypersonic weapons. The US has not been able to successfully develop such weapons. I think one of the things that's going on is that capitalism is a pretty terrible system for running your armaments industries and defending your nation with, because it's built on profits. So, you get your buddies to go down and lobby Congress and you get these big contracts, but that does not necessarily translate to, the most effective military that you could have. In many ways, it's inefficient and bloated and wasteful. Put that beside the fact that nobody in the US wants to enlist anymore. These imperial wars like Afghanistan and Iraq, they're just demoralizing. And young people, when asked, would you consider enlisting? They're like, no, I don't want to, be injured for life to go fight for the oil profits of some petroleum company. Why would I do that? It's a lot different when you're Hamas and you're fighting for liberation from a very violent and cruel occupation force. U.S. forces feel like, why are we even over here? You and I, Bruce, saw the movie What I Want You to Know recently, which was Afghanistan and Iraq war veterans talking about how disillusioned they were. Everyone in the film, they weren't anti-war before they went and were deployed. Once they were deployed, they realized, we're not doing what they said that we're doing here. And it's making things worse for the local population. And we're just driving around waiting to get blown up by an IED. So morale in the US nation and military is very, very low right now. The war in Ukraine certainly did not help that situation.
That's for sure. And just for the record, the U.S. orchestrated a coup d'etat in Kiev in 2014 that was backed up with the muscle of the Nazis, who predominate in Western Ukraine near the Poland border. And after that, one of the first things the new government did was to declare speaking of Russian in Ukraine illegal. And the people in the eastern part of the country along the Russian border, they're Russian ethnics. And that's the language they speak, Russian. And so they began holding peaceful protests and referendum campaigns saying, we want a federated Ukraine. We still want to be a part of Ukraine, but we want local autonomy to make decisions about what language we speak, etc. And so they were sent, after being trained and armed and directed by the US and NATO, they were sent to attack the Ukrainian Nazis from the West, were sent to the east to attack the Russian ethnics. And tens of thousands were killed and wounded over the next 8 years before Russia did intervene. Russia tried every diplomatic thing they could do to prevent that war. But the US always, and Europe, wanted that war, no doubt. All right, we're going to move on now to another subject that is near and dear to the heart of the global network, and that's expanding Pentagon efforts to have rocket launch facilities all over the planet, in the United States, even in our state of Maine, and around the world. What's going on?
Well, I believe that the kind of satellites that are launched for communications purposes can be pretty small. I think they're, I've heard them described as being like the size and shape of a car battery. And so a launch to put that up into low Earth orbit is not nearly as big of a deal. You don't need as big a rocket or as much power. And the Pentagon seems to be incentivizing many countries and locations to build launch sites that could be used for that purpose. Probably because in the private-public partnership that was created in our state, Maine, they want the public to fund the infrastructure so that the millionaires can become billionaires using that infrastructure for profitable launches. Again, I don't think that's a very efficient or even a very patriotic, if you want to use that word, system. And it completely overlooks the severe environmental damages that happen when a rocket launch goes right. When it goes wrong, it's catastrophic for the surrounding areas. So we've got a proposal here in Maine to build a rocket launch site off the coast of Maine near Acadia National Park. So this is the easternmost national park in the continental US. It's where you can watch the sun come up first. It's a super beautiful area. Obviously, there are a lot of really wealthy people that have homes along the shore. I don't think they know anything about this plan. You and I, Bruce, have been working on a campaign to raise awareness of this proposal by doing some advertising on the radio and print ads aimed at that audience that aren't necessarily standing with us about Palestine or necessarily against the war in Ukraine, but they would be against a rocket launch site. Not only are they bad for the breeding grounds, the fishing grounds, the seaweed harvesting grounds, but also they're real noisy. I know you told me that a friend of yours who lives somewhere near the Bath, Maine, or the Brunswick, Maine headquarters of the rocket company, one of the rocket companies that's trying to build this launch site, had their 10-year-old kid run into the room going, "What was that? What was that loud sound? It woke me up." That's how loud these things are. I can't really imagine that the people that live in that part of Maine along the coast there want such a thing. The first town where they tried to build the rocket launch site or make the proposal, the lobster fishing community immediately organized and went to the town and put a moratorium on the idea until they could really study it and think about it. So the rocket launch site people went and picked another location that they thought would be more amenable to some Benjamins, I would imagine. Some money changing hands, and it's always going to be lots of jobs. It's going to help the economy. But you and I both know, Bruce, that every time they build something like this, like in Maine, they promise it's only going to be civilian use, not military. That is a big fat lie. They always get used for military launches once built. And also they promise that, it will create, it'll be so good for the economy. And people in Kodiak, Alaska, or New Zealand who've given up land, beautiful, pristine coastal land for one of these launch sites, say, we never got any money out of it. There's a brief construction period where maybe a few locals work on it, but mostly it's like highly technical and specialized. And then, the only jobs really are like security guard and night watchman type jobs after the thing is built. So it's kind of like lose-lose proposition for the locals and, big bucks for the people doing the launches.
Just again, as you said, Rocket Lab in New Zealand, built on indigenous land. They went to the indigenous community and promised that this was going to be a civilian launch site. They were going to study the ozone. They were going to, climate change, all that stuff. But every launch in New Zealand at Rocket Lab has been a military launch. Same with, as you said, Kodiak Island, Alaska, famous for bears, bald eagles, and salmon fish. Every single launch from there, again, promised that it was going to be all civilian. Every single launch has been military, including Israel testing their Iron Dome missile defense system from there as well. And now we've just learned that in Jeju Island, where we've done a lot of work over the years to support the people of Jeju Island in South Korea, just an island just off the peninsula, they're now going to have rocket launches just offshore on these big drilling rigs, oil drilling rig kind of platforms. They're going to launch them from there right off. You can see the rig from the shoreline, and they're going to be launching military satellites for surveillance, targeting, and everything else for the coming war that the United States, its next war, wants to create with China. So this whole scene of expanding rocket launches around the world is something we're trying to pay a lot of attention to and help people organize against it. Our friends in the UK are fighting against 3 different ones right now in different parts of the UK, including in Britain and Scotland, possibly in Wales. So anyway, it's a big issue. We got about a minute left. Would you like to just kind of wrap up and share whatever's on your mind before we close?
Yeah, you're reminding me that I need to get the Jeju Island information, which I just found out yesterday, up on our website. We do have a website for the rocket launch resistance. It's called No Toxic Rockets 4. That's the numeral 4 ME, which is the abbreviation for Maine. and we've collected a lot of the research and information about rocket launch sites there and resistance to those sites. So if people are interested more in that topic, that's a good website to check out. I am just really working with a lot of other organizers right now to resist the genocide in Gaza. And it's like the old thing. If you ever wondered what you would have done during the Holocaust had you been alive then, you're doing it right now. So it's a busy time and a scary time, but all we can do is get organized and be active, right? Push back.
There you go. Thank you, Lisa. Excellent job. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks.
And thank you for watching another edition of Space Alert. We'll do another show soon with another leader from the peace movement, anti-war movement, anti-imperialist movement from a different part of the world. Until then, good luck to you all. And as Lisa just said, please get organized. Bye-bye.